In a shocking revelation on GB News, Nigel Farage exposes the truth behind Britain's border collapse. With former Attorney General Sir Michael Ellis and Labour Lord Maurice Glasman, they uncover how European judges have hijacked our laws. Farage reveals the original lie behind the Human Rights Act. It was never meant to surrender British sovereignty. Watch as they debate the judicial mutiny that blocks migrant deportations over mobile phones and chicken nuggets. This political earthquake forces Labour into a humiliating U-turn as their own MPs demand action. Don't miss the explosive confrontation that reveals who really controls Britain's borders.
Before this, I want to say a big thank you to all our supporters who helped us reach our very first 1,000 subscribers. That achievement truly means a lot and inspires us to keep giving you our best. If you haven't subscribed yet, please do it now. Most people who watch our videos aren't actually subscribed. We know life gets busy, but subscribing is completely free and it really helps us grow. Our next goal is 3,000 subscribers, and with your support, we can get there even faster. You can also support the channel by checking out the links in the description, where you'll find some valuable books. They cost you no extra, but each purchase gives us a small commission that helps us improve our content. Thank you so much for being part of this journey.
The ECHR, or specifically its incorporation into British law through the 1998 Human Rights Act. We saw just a few days ago Lord Blunkett saying it's time to, at least temporarily, suspend the ECHR. Labour MP Jo White from Bassett Law. She says again, it was established 60 years ago, it's time for a review. Jack Straw said it's time to decouple British laws from ECHR. And a member of our panel tonight wrote quite a critical article on this in the Sunday Times this week. But what's really interesting is the Straw comments. And we've been doing a little bit of digging today, and indeed we've spoken to a very senior lawyer who was around on the panel at the time that the Human Rights Act came into being, when people were discussing how it should be interpreted. And what we get very, very clearly is that in the original Human Rights Act, it's stated that British courts should take account of judgments from the European Court of Human Rights in Strasbourg. But it seems instead they're interpreting this as following the treaty, which was never the intention. Now, this is really interesting because I'm joined by former Attorney General Sir Michael Ellis and the man who wrote the article in the Sunday Times, Lord Maurice Glasman. If we just go back to the origin, because a lot of people now see this as a horror story, because the origins were honourable, weren't they?
Well, the origins were honourable, yes, but as you've said, Nigel, the fact is that over the years this has been over-interpreted. It has lost its original provenance, as you would expect after several decades, and it has now become something that it wasn't. It's become, if you like, a monster. We have created, over the period of time, a Frankenstein monster where it takes precedence over other things. That was not the original intention.
And that wasn't the intention when it was put into law. I get that. And by the way, folks, you're watching this, following this debate, let me know what you think. Farage at gbnews.com. Will Keir Starmer be forced to shift his position? So this seems to me that it's all the fault of your lot. It's the legal profession, it's the judges that have taken something that was probably actually really rather well-intentioned when Labour put it into place. And our Prime Minister, who is part of that profession, appears to be defending the current status quo and not the original idea.
It's decades of judicial mission creep is what it is. Because what's happened is, it started off with good intentions, but the reality of the matter is that it has become something else. And it didn't start off that way. That wasn't the intent. The intention was recognising the horrors of World War II, recognising the need, the ECHR and things like that, the Refugee Convention and so on, recognising that should there be a horror on anything like that scale in Europe, that the right thing be done. Now we have a situation where it's so over-interpreted that courts have ruled that if someone doesn't have a mobile phone when they arrive illegally in this country, then that is in breach of their human rights. It's not what was intended. It's run out of control, and it needs radical change.
Really interesting, Maurice, isn't it? When you go back, we we've just discussed briefly the 40s and the 50s and when this first came into being, but even, what I'm taking with fresh eyes at what 98 was intended to be. I mean, did you support it at the time?
No, at the time I didn't. I love English liberty. I love our tradition of the common law. I think if you look at it with a cold eye, you will see that our country, as Milton said, is the mansion house of liberty. And the continental system was different. The continent was ravaged by fascism and by Nazism.
That's right.
And if you look at what Churchill said, what Attlee said, what Bevin said, they had some understanding that there needed to be some constraints because democracy and liberty were so weak on the continent. But it was never intended to be part of our law. Now, this goes deep, Nigel.
No, this is a really fundamental debate.
And because 98, I don't know how good faith they were. New Labour and all of that were very much in favour of a rights-based international order where law would harmonise interests, not democracy, not politics.
Yeah, I mean, this is
the key. So when
this is
Jack
fundamental.
Straw
This
says-
debate we really have, do we? That human rights, almost by their very definition, tend to be given to us by the state, as opposed to the sort of liberties under common law.
And Morris is right. That should be how it is. That always was how it is in this country. And that's how, even if you go back to the 18th century, that is how it was. So what's happened is that there has been a deliberate encroachment. There has been an overinterpretation by, in fact, decades, generations of judicial rulings which have eaten into those liberties and said, well, they come through statute.
Is that politics, democratic politics, is subordinated to judges. It's an issue of sovereignty.
That's right.
Fundamentally at the heart of it. So when Jack Straw says that wasn't their intention, You're
a little bit sceptical even on that.
I'm sceptical because what that was, certainly, so the villain of the piece was actually Roy Jenkins, who introduced this idea that the English court should bear the convention in mind when making judgments. So that happened in
was the beginning.
64.
That wasn't
64.
Churchill's intention, it wasn't Attlee's intention.
Because they always quote Churchill.
They always quote Churchill, and he would not recognise how that law has been interpreted.
Churchill said explicitly that this may be necessary on the continent in Europe, but it wasn't
Not
for
necessary.
us.
And he's right.
And this history is good, but let's bang up to the modern day.
Yeah. Let's go up to date.
You've been putting pressure on.
Yeah.
I think I've been putting a bit of pressure on this
I
week
think
as
you
well.
have, yeah.
The voices are coming. Is Starmer going to shift on this? Or is that an impossibility with the left of your party?
No, I don't think it's an impossibility at all. So what you've got to look at, if you had an ounce of compassion in your heart, Nigel, you'd see these are people who have spent 20 to 30 years, as your party was, convinced about globalisation, convinced about a rules-based international order, convinced that this was good, convinced that this was right. All of this is falling around their ears. So it's a really, for everybody involved, it's a monumental shift to say, OK, our historical analysis was wrong, that the future is not like this, that our national interest is served by trusting our common law, by trusting our liberties. One of the ironies of all of this, which you're well aware of, is that human rights have become authoritarian. They're a way of stopping people actually expressing their fundamental liberty.
But isn't it a mindset that for those who believe that the law is master, where actually the law should be the servant, it should serve the people,
it's more complicated
not
in
rule
our
the
system,
people.
Nigel, is that we've got a mixed constitution. So the Lord Chancellor and the Attorney General sit in cabinet. The law is, but it's part of the conversation. It's not the final judge of that conversation.
It shouldn't be.
Which lies with democracy and
So
the people.
is Starmer going to shift?
I think he will.
You think he will? He's going to have to. Well, let's find somebody who wants to defend